Solution Carriage Education Program parenting class. It has been quite an event or weeks for us here in Texas. So is everyone enjoying the warm weather? I surely am. I'm enjoying the weather. Before we get started though, we're going to pick up on page 67, but in the previous class we talked about that it starts with you. And this is where we started talking about self-respect, respect for others, respect for your possessions, and respect for the environment. And as we go through and we're teaching parents, always remind them that they might feel overwhelmed by all the information that they're getting. They might feel like you have no idea what children I'm dealing with. And you're right, I have not met your children, but I do understand that sometimes it is a bit of a struggle. When you see pictures, when you see captions, when you see children, everyone, you think, man, why is my child not like that? Because children have their moments. Were you there when that mother worked hard tirelessly, or that parent worked hard, or guardian worked hard tirelessly every step of the way with that child? No. So there was effort that got to that point for you to see that child make that right choice. So as a parent, never feel bad that you're not doing what you can, because you're doing what you can with the information that you know. The parenting manual is here to show you that, yes, you've done what you can, but this is also a way that you can improve, not just with how you teach your children, but also how you interact, how you communicate with yourself, getting to know how you're thinking, how you're feeling. So these are all of the things that the parenting manual is about. It's about helping your children, but it's also about helping yourself. And this is where we're going to start on page 67, where it talks about positive goals help build self-respect. And if we, just to remind us what self-respect means, on page 65, it's the third sentence. It says, self-respect is a quality and ability that enable us to make choices showing care and concern for our own health, well-being, and life in general. This is what self-respect is. So now that we know what self-respect is, we've talked about how to take care of ourselves and in clothing. Now we're going to see how that ties into positive goals. So we covered here, we're just going to briefly go through it. So other important aspects of developing self-respect are to have purpose, goals, and a strong work ethic. And remember, a strong work ethic or a positive work ethic is in ways which you achieve your goals. Having purpose gives you a direction in which to focus your thoughts and energy. Desiring to lead a productive, fulfilling life is one example of what it means to have purpose. Without positive purpose, life tends to lose direction, and it becomes easy to drift aimlessly from one day to the next. Purpose gives us determination to meet deadlines, accomplish tasks, and lead a useful life. Along with having purpose, it is also important to have a positive, achievable goals. A goal is an end that you strive to attain. By taking this parenting course, you're working towards the goal of becoming a positive, more effective parent. So notice that says that your purpose helps you to meet deadlines, gives you, something to do, and you can kind of look at it as it gives you a schedule. It gives you, I'm going to do this, and I need to do this by this time. So that's kind of what your purpose does in your life. Now, if you remember, for purpose, we referenced the acceptance book, chapter 5, and the Building More Excellence book, page 113. And then for setting goals, we reference acceptance, chapter 5, for purpose, and then chapter 6, the acceptance book, chapter 6, for goals. And then the Building More Excellence book, page 130 and 131, where it says that there is a purpose in life, and your goals help you recognize that. So that was the acceptance book, chapter 5, and the Building More Excellence book, page 130, for purpose. And for setting goals, the acceptance book, chapter 6, and Building More Excellence book, page 131. So to go to the next paragraph, where it says, goals of improvement, such as controlling one's temper, getting to work on time, and spending more time with your children, are worth pursuing and achieving. By assessing your needs and your wants, you can determine the goals you would like to accomplish. So what is important? What can I actually do and where I'm at in life right now? Because even if you think about first just as an individual, setting those goals might be a little bit difficult. But when you're a parent, your choices affect your children. They affect your spouse. They affect everyone in your family. And the goals that you set, those are going to be the examples for your children. I mean, how many of you have heard people who children were firefighters, or their parents were firefighters, and because their parents were a firefighter, they wanted to be a firefighter, or because they were a cashier, or something like that. Because their parents did it, they wanted to do it. So your goals, the things that you do, actually become a kind of like a guide for your children. Is this what I want to become? Is this something that I want to do with my life? So really think about it when you're setting your goals. Is this something that I would be okay with my child doing? And as you are setting what you need versus what you want, realize that it takes time to accomplish these goals. I mean, imagine how long it takes to be able to pay off the house when you have a mortgage. Imagine those things. Sometimes people have 20 years. There's finances for 35 years or however long. It takes time. So imagine that process. It takes that much time to be able to accomplish even what might seem like a small goal. But how many choices does it take? Change takes a process. It's a process that takes time, and we must be patient with ourselves. As guardians or people that deal with others, we always tell everyone else, be careful of that person. It takes time. Look in the mirror and say that to yourself. It takes time. It's going to take time for you to get to the point where you understand that that time in life you didn't have all the tools that you needed. So really be patient with yourself as well. When it comes to setting goals and achieving goals, having a positive work ethic can make the difference between success and failure. A positive work ethic enables you to pursue your goals with a moral character. Now, then that poses the question, what is success and what is failure? Am I judging my success if it matches someone else? Comparison gets us nowhere. It only makes us doubt ourselves more. So a positive work ethic enables you to pursue your goals with moral character. And remember, a positive work ethic is in a way which you achieve your goals. And if your moral character is always in the forefront of your mind, then you're always thinking, is the choice I'm making going to hurt myself, others, or the environment? Is it going to help me where I want to be in life? And that where I want to be in life can be really big, but it can also be that one point where do I value just being alive? That can be your focal point. Am I to the point now where I am okay with waking up every morning? And if I'm not, then I need to adjust some thoughts that are going on in my mind. I might need to seek help. And one thing that I've been thinking as an individual myself, sometimes it can be hard to seek help. So as parents, I imagine it can be even harder to seek help because you might think, these are my children, I should know what's best for them. But sometimes as we're going through our own struggles, and we might have financial battles, or we might have problems at work, or may have disagreements, we also need to seek help. It's okay to seek help for the things that you believe you shouldn't need help for, because seeking help is actually a big step in realizing that I can change. I can lean on other people. All right, so go on to the next part. It says, traits such as determination, honesty, responsibility, discipline, self-control, and perseverance are only some of the moral character traits that constitute a positive work ethic. And you notice how they all build on top of each other. Self-control, controlling what you think, feeling, and acting, while also being honest, always telling the truth. The next paragraph, it says, armed with these key character traits, setting and achieving goals to better your life and the lives of your children is possible. But a word of caution, achieving an objective should never override your ultimate goal of developing a positive moral character. For example, if someone's goal is to graduate for college and he cheats on the final exam, then he is not using positive character traits to achieve his goal. So it's okay to have a goal, but also how are you achieving that goal? Are you still being honest in achieving that goal? The individual with positive character will study and achieve his goal honestly. When you have purpose in life, set goals and pursue them with a strong work ethic. You are demonstrating self-respect for your life and well-being. This reminds me of when I was in school. There were some things that were not my strong point. And I remember some of my teachers telling me, you can cheat on your classmate's test. You can. But what are you going to do in life when that classmate's not there for you to cheat on, whenever you're trying to do math or whenever you're trying to figure out, where this punctuation goes, or when you're trying to figure things out. So yes, doing it, trying to figure things out might be a little bit difficult, but take the time. It might take a little bit longer, but it'll be well worth the effort. All right, so now we're going to go down to complete the following exercise by filling in the blanks. So on page 67 to the top of page 68, it has an exercise. So number 1, you're going to name your purpose in life. 2, you're going to list goals in the order of priority you want to achieve. And then 3, what changes will you need to make in your life to accomplish your goals? So I'm just kind of going to give you examples so you could see in a way which you would carry out this exercise. So if someone's purpose in life could be to be successful and for their family to want nothing in life, to always have the things that they need. So the 3 goals that they might have would be to get a stable job, or maybe to start a business, to be able to have a house or an apartment, and to buy a car for transportation. Now these are some goals that they might set to achieve. But buying a house would probably have goals for itself. I need to set this much money aside a week. I need to, set back on this. I need to do this. And changes that you will need to make to accomplish your goals would be to budget and also educate yourself what the best options are. You don't want to buy a house where it's not in a great school district for your children to go to, or it's not in a great, or where it's not close to your work, or whatever. These are just things that really you keep in mind when you're trying to accomplish your goals. What makes them accomplishable? All right, and then another purpose I was thinking of is sometimes we just want to make everyone's life, we just want to make life better. And 3 goals that you can do in order to achieve that is to starting to figure out who you are as a person. What does a peaceful life look like in your eyes? What do I want in my life? And then start by being an active listener. Listen to everyone, because you'll start to listen and to be able to see what makes life a little bit difficult for others. What is a way that I can help? And educate yourself. Maybe you want to join nonprofit organizations. Maybe you want to help, teach in certain communities, be a tutor, or help out at food banks. And a way that you would do this is you could, in taking care of yourself, set a proper schedule, making sure that you're drinking water and you're sleeping properly and you're eating when you're supposed to. And that might sound like such basic things, but have you ever not got a proper amount of sleep? Oh my word. It actually makes the mental balance a little bit more harder because you can't think clearly. And if you're not drinking enough water, then you're even more tired and you're dehydrated. And if you don't eat properly, it's like everything connects together. It starts with the brain. So when the brain is not getting the things necessary, it really throws your whole body off. And then you might not be able to control your temper the way that you might be able to if you were taking care of yourself properly. So this is why the Peaceful Solution impresses so much that taking care of yourself is so important, because if you don't take care of yourself, how are you going to reach out and help someone else? So let's go ahead and go to a few tips for teaching respect. So, there was one point I wanted to point out, is that journaling. As a parent, it might be an interesting thing to find something that you personally like a hobby. Because everyone needs stress relievers, right? Some might like making bracelets, some might like making, signs or sewing. And journaling might help as well to relieve stress, or to be able to see, okay, this is not how today went. It could have went a little bit better. So you can learn from the days before on the things that went great, the things that didn't go so well, and find a hobby for yourself. Because there's times where you might have downtime, or you might realize that, hey, I wasn't great at this before, but now I am. And you can start to build your self-worth the more that we reach out and try to just really see, how can I improve myself in various areas? Because I know we're talking about teaching children, But as parents, having your own self-worth is super, super important. Realizing that I might fail in certain areas, but I'm great at this. And you will continue with your efforts. You will become a very, very great parent. All right. So it says a few tips for teaching respect. Children are like sponges. They soak up the values of those around them. An environment where respect is valued and practiced, children can become respectful individuals with the ability to make sound decisions that will not compromise their integrity. There are many ways you can teach children to have respect, even from a very young age, but keep in mind that children learn through repetition. So be prepared to patiently teach, instruct, and guide over and over and over. Implement the following tips and techniques daily to teach your children respect. In the previous classes, the teacher mentioned how whenever you have rules, to list them up, to put them on a board or something so the children can see it. And that's really important because children are very visual learners. So if they see it there, you repeat it, then they're more likely to say, oh, this was what they said last time. I can just look at the rules. I mean, think about how we learned our numbers. Some of us learned our numbers through songs, our ABCs through songs. So that repetition every single day, going over your ABCs, going over your numbers. And that's the exact way we're going to be able to help them develop this respect through our example. Has a child ever pointed something out to you before and it might have embarrassed you? But did you know that the way you responded to that child taught that child how they should respond to you when you correct them? I personally have had siblings say, like, you took that without asking, and I could think, well, you weren't there. But then if I was to tell them that, that's teaching them that they can touch my belongings when I'm not there either. So whenever they walk into my room, I said, what are you doing in my room? Well, you came in my room. Now, this has occurred. I'm just going to be honest, it has occurred. But it's really helped me remember that what I say is an example for them. I am an older sibling. What I do sets that pattern for them as they are coming up. So if I don't want to see my siblings doing this, then I should try my best to not do it. If I do something wrong, then I try my best to apologize or say, I'm sorry if I hurt you in this situation or if I came across rude in this situation. And that right there sets a pattern that I recognize what I did was wrong and helps them to hopefully set the example. It sets the example for them to, when they do something wrong, to apologize or realize that, you can do better. So as parents, we also set this example. And when we continue to be patient and not mind to repeat things over and over and over, then you'll start seeing your efforts pay off. Okay, so going on, it says family members should never start off their day by ignoring each other, greeting each other every morning. Ask family members if they slept well or if they had a great night. Now, they seem like small things, but there's something that really show if you value someone else. And I know there's various cultures, so a lot of people that I have heard, they have been raised to say hello to someone every time they see someone. But there are also those who have not been encouraged to do that. So it might become as a little bit of a struggle to always say hello to someone. But over time, just practice. Every time you see someone, just saying hello. And through that repetition with yourself, you'll develop that habit and you'll start seeing that it becomes a little bit easier. Teach children to say please when they need something, thank you when they have received something, or someone has done something for them, and excuse me please when someone is in the way. Now, these are what's kind of known as basic manners. But just because they're basic manners and everyone should do them does not mean that we shouldn't be kind to remind people, to say please, say thank you. Because I've noticed personally, if I'm around a group of people, sometimes attitudes start to change and you forget to do some of the basic things. And so if you're continuing to be around those people, then you might forget that, this is actually how I'm supposed to behave. And so keep that in mind whenever you are around, when your children are around other people. It does not mean that when your children are around other people, they might pick up different habits. But be kind enough and patient enough to remind them. Be respectful no matter who you're around. Always say please, always say thank you. Always use a proper tone of voice. No matter if you want to admit that you don't like this person or not. Respect is something that is deserved. It is not earned. It is deserved. Everywhere, every place, every time. Teach children to answer when you call them. Don't expect what as an answer. Instruct them to say, yes, Mom, or I'll be right there. And when you're addressing certain authority figures, use their proper titles. And I know sometimes, you can say, yes, Mom, and they're like, was that respectful? And they're like, well, I said yes, Mom. But remember, it can also be the tone of voice. So point that out. If your child said something wrong, don't just say, you know what's wrong. Kindly explain to them, this is what was a form of disrespect. So they can understand, this is what I did was wrong, and this is how I can fix it. Do not allow your children to talk back. If your child has gotten into the habit of back-talking, firmly and sternly tell the child he is not to continue speaking. Continuing will result in a consequence or a loss of a privilege. And correction should never result in slapping or hitting someone. Correction should never result in that. And we also talked before about the silver spoon, everyone having a right to opportunity to speak. And when you're correcting a child, I mentioned this in the class before that, it worked whenever I told the child, okay, you have your time to speak. I'm going to have my time to speak right now. And then they had their time to speak. And what that did was let us hear each other with an open mind. And then we were able to work things out. Because when you're both talking to each other, when you're both like, the other person has no idea what I'm thinking or feeling, maybe they don't. But be kind enough and respectful enough to listen to what other person has to say. Number 5, teach children to care for their belongings. Have hooks low enough for children to hang up their coats and a designated place for shoes and knapsacks or book bags. And this right there, having names on things, teaching children, where to put things over and over and over, teaches responsibility and to care for their belongings. It's one of the basic things we teach about ownership, putting your things where they go. When you put things up where they go, you're more or less likely to find them. And that prevents you from being late for certain things when you always put things where they go. Number 6, teach children to care for things in the home. For example, no writing on the walls or putting feet on furniture. And this teaches to value belongings, even if the belonging does not belong to you. We all seem to, sometimes care about our belongings, but other people's belongings have feelings concerning their belongings. We don't want you to jump at our house, or we don't want you to ride on our belongings, so don't do it to other people's belongings. Number 7, never allow a child to speak to you in a disrespectful way. If this occurs, have them repeat the statement in an acceptable tone of voice. For example, give me a glass of water. This is a tone of demand and is something that is not acceptable. Would you give me a glass of water, please? That is an example of how you would kindly ask for water. And keep in mind how we address and communicate with other people as parents, because sometimes our children are just a mirror of us. And so if we're careful of how we say and we adjust our tone of voice, we can see changes be a little bit different. So the tone of voice is important. And if a child just say, give me a glass of water, give me this, let that be an opportunity to teach that child to fix that. Is that the proper way to say that? No. So would you please give me a glass of water? Can I please have a glass of water? So right there, use that as an opportunity to show that child the best way to ask for something. Number 8, teach children to respect the concept of ownership. Usually we are unaware of the concept of ownership until someone uses one of our belongings without asking for and receiving our permission. Then we're like, excuse me, we are supposed to ask? It's like, we're supposed to ask before we touch anyone's possession. And the most important thing is to accept the answer that is given concerning whenever you ask for that belonging. Respecting ownership is not something that we are born with. And that's really something to keep in mind as we're going through is that all of these concepts are something that is taught. These are learned behaviors. Everyone, babies especially, have a natural curiosity about objects they see. Colors, shapes, and sizes are all attractive to the eye. Teaching a child to ask and receive permission before touching someone else's belongings is essentially teaching them to not steal. Right here, starting from the small, you see how it will ripple out and it will affect. Teaching children to ask before they touch something. Before they touch something. You know, that act of touching is even wrong in itself. So asking before they touch something, and then when they've received that answer, accept that answer in the appropriate way. Throwing a tantrum on the floor is not acceptable. Throwing a shoe across the room is not acceptable. No is no, and yes is yes. And it's also important to remember that things can change. Children can become disappointed when you tell them yes at this moment, and then if they ask later in the day, you say no. And remind them that that's okay. This is my belonging, and I said no at this time. So when you accept my answer, then you are showing me respect. Just like if I asked you and you told me no, you would want me to accept that answer. When we consider the conflicts that arise between even the youngest toddlers, because one took their belongings without asking, to the school-age child whose crowns were stolen, to the junior high child whose bike was stolen, to the adult whose car was stolen, we see the need to begin training children to develop the habit of asking permission before touching the belongings of others. To begin teaching this important habit, you must first be aware that everything you see belongs to someone. Begin to develop this habit of asking permission first in order to respect the belongings of others and encourage those around you to do the same. So this starts with ourselves, but as I was going over that, I thought about trains. We always talk about this, but it's like the most prominent example of trespassing. We always see trains and we think this graffiti is so beautiful, because it can be beautiful at times. But when you look at it, it is also an act everywhere of where someone is trespassing. Someone did not ask to spray paint all over that. Because believe me, if the train people wanted you to have spray paint and graffiti all over, I'm sure they would have paid for it on there. But they didn't want it on there. And so if you do see those things, point those out. That you see that, that's graffiti. It is beautiful. But it is not supposed to be on there. But because someone did not respect the rights of ownership, that is why it is on there. So as you go through things and you see certain acts of vandalism or you see it on the news, explain that this is where a right of ownership was disrespected. There's a stop sign in Abilene and it has a spray paint on it. And every time I see that, I think, well, that is where someone did not practice the STOP acronym because they vandalized the stop sign. And so if people continue to do that, and then the stop sign gets taken out, doesn't get put back up for a time, what do you think is going to occur to that road? People are going to start colliding, all because someone decided to vandalize that place or that stop sign. So our actions, they might seem small, but they ripple out. And we were talking about purpose, so I really wanted to share this with you, that there was a teacher, and she had taught the peaceful solution for a bit of time, and there was one class that she was teaching, and she said that it was about having self-worth and finding a purpose in life. And at her point at that time in her life, she was really struggling with it. She was struggling to find her purpose in life. Was she actually okay with being alive? All of these things. And in one class, they were talking about, finding your purpose, having self-worth, and she was encouraging her students to have self-worth when she wasn't finding it when she hadn't found it herself. So there was one day that she said she was standing in her kitchen and she was having a very rough day, and she thought to herself, she was having very negative thoughts, and she thought to herself, how am I teaching other people to not escape their problems when I'm trying to do it myself? And she said that was the turning point in her life where she realized that I will no longer make escaping my situations an option. I will only make it an option to keep going. And in situations, we might feel this way, that we want to escape these situations. but no longer make that an option. Only make it an option for you to continue to keep going forward. Because the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program shows you that if you are willing to apply this program, change is possible and you will become the best person that you can ever be. And with this, I'll turn it over to the next teacher.
All right, everyone. For everyone who's just might be tuning in, we are in the Parenting Manual, The Peaceful Solution, on page 69. And we're going over a few tips for teaching respect. And I want to just remind everyone that we are taking this course, it's training to be teachers, teaching this program to parents. And whenever you are, teaching this and addressing this to parents, overall, this can be very overwhelming. Being a parent in general is the biggest job you will ever take on in your entire life. And then you pack on, okay, now you need to have respect, you need to have self-control, you need to have responsibility, you need to make sure your child, when they're not with you, is making right choices. You need to make sure they're not being influenced by things that are completely out of your control. You need to make sure that they're aware of the influences that are out there, so that when they're not with you, now go ahead and go do this, and then I hope you have a great life. That's how it can seem when you come to one class and you sit down and everything is overwhelming. So we want to remind, as teachers teaching parents, that you want to take it one step at a time. Pick one thing that, okay, this week or this month, I'm going to conquer self-control. And I'm just going to work on me. And then my child will see that I didn't snap at them when I normally would. And your children will notice when you don't snap at them that one time. Oh, well, if mom didn't do that, or Dad didn't yell at me when I did that, okay, so I shouldn't yell at my brother, because then you recognize. The child can recognize. So just remember that. Never judge as a parent, as teaching parents, don't allow the parents to judge their middle off someone else's ending, because it can be very overwhelming when you do that. All right, so I'm going to go into page 69 under a few tips for teaching respect, and she covered from 1 to 8, so we're going to pick up on number 9. It says, teach children to respect the environment. Never allow children to throw garbage on the ground or out the car window. If walking a dog in a public area, be sure to pick up and dispose of the dog's waste. And that goes along with teaching to respect for the environment, but respect your fellow man. Because this earth isn't just for us. We're going to grow old, and then our children are going to grow up, and then they're going to have children, and this earth is still going to be there. We might not be around in 200 years, but the earth is still going to be here. And whatever we do today is going to affect it later on. And it's so important that our children, as a child and as a parent, sometimes we see our home space as our whole world, and it should be, but there's a world outside of that world. And that world is affected by what we do inside our small world. Because the people in this small world is going to branch out into this bigger world. And we're respecting our environment. We recognize that everything belongs to someone. And the earth, I'm going to want my child to be able to breathe one day. I'm going to want my child to still be able to have food that can support their bodies and sustain their lives. So teach our children, small things, even if they want to start a garden or something like that, to bring it real to them so they recognize the respect for the environment. All right, number 10. Teach children respect for all people by encouraging them to use positive words when describing or talk about others. And that is so important because, especially with our social media world that we live in today, slangs are very common. And a lot of the times, whenever somebody posts a slang word or a slang comment, I have to Google it because I don't know what it is. I'm not really that old, but apparently I'm too old to get slangs that are on social media these days. And so when you have to Google a phrase to find out if it's okay for you to repeat or not, our society has taken a turn for the worse. When I say something and now I realize that my friend who doesn't look exactly like me can take offense to this because I didn't realize in our society this is now an offensive term, we have to educate our children on this. Don't repeat everything you see, everything you read. Because where you're not meaning it to be rude, or maybe they are, and they just need to be educated again, but they don't know. But the person that you're talking to, they might be having the worst time of their life, and that one phrase set them over the edge. You just never know. That's why we have to respect all people and the way that we're talking about them and the way that we're talking to them, whether it be physically talking to them or talking about them on social media. All right, it says words that devalue, and if you want to circle that word devalue and put it don't deem as important. You don't recognize them as important, okay? To devalue someone. Words that devalue others, which means ways that you don't see them as important, due to their nationality, their ethnicity, should never be allowed. And that means whenever we see our child or hear them making certain comments, jump on it right then. And if you don't know what it is and you've never heard it before and your child is saying it, ask them what it means. And if they say, I don't know, then that word should immediately be removed from their vocabulary. Because if you don't know what something means, you should not be saying it. And it is very important to impress that upon our parents. I know in our society today, it's becoming where parents are supposed to be best friends with their children. And you do. You need that open communication line where you can talk to your parents as if, they're your friend. But a parent also has to have a level of that guidance and that understanding where everything doesn't fly. You have to recognize that, yes, I'm your friend. I want you to come to me when you're going through something. I want you to feel that you can tell me anything, and I'm not going to make you feel this small because I can't believe you considered that. I want you to talk to me, but I'm also going to give you that guidance. And then if it continues on and you build that support and that communication, a child will eventually open up to you. And believe me, you want your child to open up to you before they go to Google or TikTok or Snapchat or Instagram, because there's a lot of people who want to help our children, and it's not always in the best, positive, moral way. All right, continue on page 69. It says, mistreating others because they are physically or mentally disabled should not be tolerated. And if we're completely open and honest with ourselves, we can all fall into the category of being mentally disabled at some level or not. And that's just the truth. That's no disrespect. That's no sarcasm. That's the truth. On some level, we all can say that we struggle or we fall into that category there. And the same understanding that we want someone to have for us when we say something out of ignorance, we should give that to someone else. On the top of page 70, it says, developing tolerance and respect for others will make the world a better place. Underline that or highlight that in your book, okay? Developing tolerance and respect for others will make the world a better place. And remember, you don't know someone else's story. What you see is this one glance that you see them, or maybe you hear about them, or maybe you've seen them or followed them on social media, but you don't know their story. So we can't judge their progress or their lack of progress because you don't really know them. But across the board, we give respect for everyone because with the background or the environment that they grew up in, they're probably doing 100% better than they were 5 years ago. But you didn't know them 5 years ago. So you don't know their growth. You don't know their strength, and you don't know where they still struggle. So it's so important as teachers teaching parents that we reinforce this for them to teach their children. And to also have it for yourself, because I've heard a lot of parents, or a lot of people, who say, I can't be a parent because I'd never want to burden a child with the feelings that I have, or the thoughts that I have, or the emotions that I deal with. Why would I want a child to have to deal with what I deal with every day? And to them, I would say, be the best version that you can be. Don't focus on who you are right now. Don't focus on who you were yesterday. Where are you going to go from now? What are you going to do from now? Because today you don't want to be a parent, but if you work on improving yourself, in 10 years, even if you can't have children, you can foster a child, you can adopt a child, you can change an entire world for a child, and you'd never know the true joy that comes from being a parent in that situation. All right, so that concludes procedure 9. So we're going to flip over to the procedure and go to procedure 10. All right, so lesson plan 8, page 8B, procedure 10. It says, conclude by reading the last paragraph on page 70. Encourage students to always set the example of positive moral character for their children to learn by. To restrict or eliminate negative influences via the media, and to insist upon respectful actions and words from their children. All right, so we're going to flip over to page 70. And starting at the top of that paragraph, it says, encourage children to look for an opportunity to accentuate the positive. And I put a side note, to eliminate the negative. Remember, for those of you who've been with us from the beginning, we've learned all the way back in the character unit. to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative from our character, from our thoughts, from our feelings, from our everyday lives. In all people, regardless of where they are from, what they look like, or what they believe, always find the positive. If you can find 10 negative things about a person, you should have found 30 positive. Now, keep in mind, if you're looking for negative, that is all you will ever see. If you are looking for something to irritate you about a person, you will find 1.5 million reasons. And you'll consider them very valid, because in our emotional state, they are very valid to us. But you should always impress upon yourself, your mind, and your children to always look for the positive in every person, in every situation that they come in contact with. Look for something beneficial in every person and see their potential. Somebody once said to me, don't see the child who's acting out in front of you as this rebellious child who's out of control. Because in 60 years, they could be the most amazing president of the United States. You never know. They could be the person who changed the world. But what you say to them today can make or break that person in 50 years. Because that one statement is going to be with them whenever they're down. Whatever you said to them in that moment, that's what they're going to remember every single time that they're down. Or every single time they see a person and you say, there was this picture of, there was a mother with her daughter and then another woman with her son. And they were looking across the street and there was a man who was sweeping the road. And one child said, Mommy, what is he doing? And he said, oh, don't worry, I'll make sure you're never like him. And the other child looked at her mother and she said, Mommy, what is he doing? And she said, don't worry, we will make it a better place for him. And if you change the way you look at that, it completely changes the way you view the world. You can look at people who are quote unquote less fortunate, people who didn't know the proper way to behave and they end up in prison at a young age, they end up making bad choices. You can look at them as the downside of society. Or you can recognize them as someone that you can make the world a better place for them. You can educate a world where that world doesn't exist anymore. You can your child can learn to grow up to where when they're in an environment and they have friends who are doing this, not only are they not going to make those choices, they're going to help them see reason why they don't have to make them either. There is an alternate way of life. You don't have to go the only way that you've known how. All right, continue on. It says, this is best role modeled by you, the parents. Your respect for others will ripple outward to other children as well. And it's so important as parents that we're always on guard of our mind, our emotions, our thoughts, and the way that we interact with fellow adults, and the way we interact with children, and the way we interact with other people's children. Because someone is always watching and they're always going to remember how we behaved, especially if you're someone who's a role model in that community. That one down or bad moment that you had, any child that was there to witness it, that's now a label. Until you rewind, and you fix that, and then you can try to go from there. But somebody is always watching. All right, and they give us a note here that I wanted to read for you guys, and it's, if you give up on a child, that is the moment you have failed as a teacher. So keep that in mind. Even the worst, hardened, rebellious child that you think there's no coming back from, in 10 years, they could be the most amazing peaceful solution instructor. You never know. All right, and the quote here with the 3 little babies in the baskets, they says, our most precious possessions are our children. And I want to add with that, guard them with your life. You have to guard our children with our lives. And that is not only your physical life, but your emotional sanity, your time, your sleep. Constantly be aware of your child and making sure not only that they know they're not alone in this world, but making sure they have the tools of what it takes to recognize their value, especially when they're not around you. And it says, most people value and appreciate their children, but there are some in our society that don't. The Peaceful Solution parenting program can change the hearts and minds towards their children. And that is our goal through this parenting manual of teaching this to parents, is to recognize that no matter where you came from, no matter what background you came from, no matter if your family, you have a history of alcoholics, you have a history of drug addicts, you have a history of people and you're the first generation who never went to prison out of the last 4, that's okay. you can turn it around without creating hatred and animosity for those who came before you. Because we always want to impress upon the parents' minds that even though your parents didn't make the best decisions for you, or you find that there are things that, as raising your child, that you would do differently, always recognize that our parents did the best they could with what they knew, and never creating a hatred or an animosity or an anger towards them, but giving that sympathy and that empathy to realize that without any education, we could fall in the exact same thing and the cycle would continue. All right, so that concludes the lesson 8. So we're going to go into lesson 9 on lesson plan 9, page 9A. All right, so the lesson plan 9 is teaching children responsibility. And if you notice over the last few lessons, we've been building. We went from self-control, and now we have respect, and now we're going into responsibility. It says the purpose and objective is that students will learn techniques to help them teach their children how to be responsible. The materials needed is the parenting manual and pencils and a pen. Now our purpose, all right, is our first procedure, as we always remember, is to review the previous lesson. All right, so briefly review lesson 8, teaching children about respect, by asking the following questions. What does respect mean? All right, so this is the question that we're going to give here. And if you are teaching this in a class, allow as many answers as possible. And they do not always have to be correct, because you want to get your class talking and you want to get their perspective. You want to get their views. What stuck out to them from the previous classes that they were learning? What techniques did they learn from us, but also mixing it with their own understanding? What did they form? What thoughts did they form here? All right, now the answer that they give us here is that respect, the book definition, is to show honor, esteem, care, and concern for others, property, the environment, and ourselves. So if they give any answers that fall in those categories, they did an excellent job, and make sure you commend them for their efforts. The fact that they raised their hand and they're getting involved is a huge improvement in a class. All right, so for your books, if you want to make reference to page 61, paragraph 1, that's actually where we talked about that. All right, so page 61, paragraph 1, and I'm going to flip over there and read it. In the top of the paragraph, it says, another important positive character trait that every parent must have is respect. Respect is to show honor, esteem, care, and concern for others, property, the environment, ourselves, and all life. Okay, so that's our reference for that. Question number 2. What are some factors that contribute to a lack of respect? Okay, and that again, you'll want to leave it open so they can just share with you what maybe they seen something that they noticed factored into their child when they were being disrespectful, or maybe they recognized something in themselves that I didn't realize that this was causing me to be disrespectful to my child. I didn't realize that this had some kind of influence in me that was keeping me from doing the right thing of showing respect. Now the answers they give us here is entertainment, fashion, decline in morals, and etc. So anything that falls under those categories, excellent answers. All right, so we're going to make a reference to page 61 and 62. All right, so page 61 and 62, if we make a reference there, and they break down the different examples that we gave there that fall under entertainment, fashion, and our decline in moral values. Right, and then our third question is, what are 4 main categories of respect? Now there are 4 main categories that they give us here in the unit, and in this manual, but remember, keep them open and talking. If they come up with something that falls under one of these categories, help them identify which one, and then where it falls under there, because then they're connecting it themselves. So when they're not in class, they learn enough that they're able to teach it to someone else, because that's really our goal, is to teach this to parents, and then they can branch out and teach it to children and also more parents. All right, now the 4 categories that they give us in the book here is self-respect, respect for others, property, and respect for the environment. And that we can reference to page 63 and 65. Okay, so page 63 and then 65. You can find it on both of those. All right, so it starts with you on page 63. That's where it gives us the 4 main categories: self-respect, respect for others, respect for possessions, both yours and others, and then respect for the environment. And then on page 65 is when it goes more in detail on self-respect. Okay, so that one category there. All right, so coming back to lesson plan 9, page 9A, we're going to read procedure number 2. It says, explain to students that in today's society, they will learn how to help their children become responsible. Ask for volunteers to tell in their own words what being responsible means to them. Okay, so that again, you'll leave that open talking session there, open where they can share with you what do they need to do to teach their child responsibility. Because if you have a child already, you've got some level of responsibility. You know what is expected of you. You know what you have to do. If you have a job, you know some responsibilities that you have to do. If you have a car, if you have a phone, well, you have to pay for those. So now you have to be responsible of knowing the due date so they don't get shut off, your electric bill, all of these things. So you have responsibilities. But now you've got to teach them to your child. And a child doesn't care about an electric bill, and a child doesn't care about how much gas is in your car. But a child does care about their teddy bear that they left outside in the rain and now it's molded and you have to throw it away. They're going to remember that they should have been responsible for that. But if we just take it and throw it away without bringing it in front of them, letting them see what became of it, because we weren't responsible, then they recognize, okay, this is something that's important to me. I can relate to this. I care about this. And then they're going to learn from there to be responsible, taking small tips from there. All right, so depending upon the age group that you're teaching of parents, because the age does range, you're going to get different answers for responsibility, okay, for what it means to be responsible. And every answer is welcome, and use that answer to create a discussion, okay, formulate a discussion in your class. All right, now if you want to make a reference for page 18 in this book, they actually do give us. So if you've been following from the beginning, you would have learned the definition for responsibility or responsible is on page 18. So the bottom of page 18, it says responsible is always doing what is necessary to complete a task. Okay, so that's what it means to be responsible. So we're going to go into procedure number 3. And it says, paraphrase the first 2 paragraphs on page 71. Explain that in many ways, children are a reflection of their parents. Underline that sentence there, okay? In many ways, children are a reflection of their parents. Have students express what they would like to see reflected in their children. Have a volunteer read the section entitled Responsibility, What is it? On page 71. Have students write down ways they are responsible. Volunteers can share with the class. All right, so we're going to flip over to page 71. And I want you to keep in mind, though, the last thing it gave here, and it said have volunteers write the section. In every lesson so far of the parenting manual, it is said to write something down. And I will tell you, I am the biggest, I can come up with a million goals and a million things that I'm going to do, and I have them in my head, and I go to sleep, and I wake up, and I cannot remember the first thing I had to do. Or I say, when I have time, I'm going to do this. And then last week, because we were blessed to be in Texas and everything froze and we lost electricity and I was blessed to be at home, I could not remember the first thing of all the things that I said I would do when I had the time to do it. I still found things to do in that time, but I couldn't remember the things that I had made that I said I'll get around to it. Now I have the time and I couldn't do it. So that's why it's so important to write it down, because it reinforces it in our mind, but it also gets you to see what's going on inside your head. Because, we talk to people on and off all throughout the day, and we talk about surface things, or if you have a really close friend, maybe you get into a topic. But if you don't talk to someone for 30 minutes, an hour and a half, you don't really get to the source of how someone's feeling. You don't really get to the viewpoint of how you're feeling. Because as a parent, you're focused on what your child needs, you're focused on what your spouse needs, you're focused on what your business or your work needs. You have all of these outer focuses that as a parent, you're not really focusing internal. And that is where you're going to find the most growth. So when you write it down, it makes it more real to you, but you're also more accountable if you look down and you see it. It's almost like it's something that's there nagging at you because you can't ignore it because you wrote it down. Like you can't just delete it like you can on your phone. It's always on that paper, unless you crumble it up and throw it away, which I do not encourage you to do that because that defeats the purpose of the activity. But always write it down. All right, so going to the top of page 71, this is lesson 9, teaching children responsibility. As parents, we have a great responsibility to prepare today's children for tomorrow's world. And every time we're interacting with parents or children, remember, we're not just talking to children today. We're talking to the tomorrow that you hope to see. And if you don't want to see a tomorrow where leaders continue to hate each other, where parents are battling against each other to see whose child is better than the other one, they're pitting people against each other, if you don't want a world where looting has become a thing, then you have to teach a child to be better. Don't just expect it or cross your fingers and hope tomorrow's generation is better. If we don't put the work in today, tomorrow's going to be worse than today. It's not going to get any better. It's not. It's just going to continue to spiral out of control. It says, by modeling positive character, children will follow our examples and make choices that will benefit themselves and society. And remember, a child will follow what you do more than they will follow what you say. Because I can talk all day long, but if I really believe it, I'll do it. And you'll see it in my actions. And if I want you to be patient, or if I want you to be compassionate, I'm going to take the extra time to demonstrate this in front of you. I'm going to show you how to be compassionate. I'm not just going to say, I can't believe you talked to your friend that way. Did you really not think she was going to cry? Like, did you really not think that that was rude? Well, that's what you did to your friend last week, or that's what I read on social media when you posted that about them. Our actions have to match up with what we're saying, or our children will never be better than not only we are, but the world that we hope they can become. All right, now, think of the example of a father. I've heard this scenario since I was a kid, of a father who is coughing and hacking, but he won't give up his cigarettes, and he is telling his child, you better not smoke. Smoking is bad for you. The child will watch their parent completely deteriorate and break down, and they don't give up this bad habit. Why would our children make a better choice when death was acceptable for you to not give up a bad habit? And I don't say that disrespectful, because I understand that it can become a disease, and it is a mental battle, and it takes a lot of willpower to stop doing that, to get over a drug addiction, to get over becoming an alcoholic. It takes serious discipline, and it takes a lot of self-control. But is our future worth it? Is our child worth it to be able to give up this bad habit? Are they worth it? All right, it says, it is a fact that who children become and what they deem important depends largely on what they are taught and what they put into practice. Okay, so our children, it depends on what we do in front of them. What do we see as important? That's what they're going to value as important. It is a parent's responsibility to instill within their children the need to practice positive character in all aspects of their lives. Parents who are accountable and responsible for their choices will be able to raise children who choose to be accountable and responsible as well. And I want to put a disclaimer there. If you are a parent who feels that you are not responsible or you're not always accountable for your actions, that's okay. We're not saying that you can't do this. We're saying that with work and effort, you can accomplish anything you set your mind to do. Okay, so parents who are accountable or who are striving to be accountable, who are practicing to have responsibility for their choices, will be able to raise children who do the same things. Through your actions, you can create a child who does the same thing. This will develop a greater sense of self-worth, and I want you to underline this in your book. This will develop a greater sense of self-worth and confidence in their ability to make the right choice. So you're actually giving this power to your child to be able to make the right choice. They will earn the reputation of being dependable and trustworthy people who take responsibility for their actions. All right, and we are out of time, so I'm going to end there. Next class, we're going to pick up in responsibility. What is it? And I hope everyone has a wonderful week, and we'll see y'all back here next week. Thank you for your time.